I had been living alone for a while now. My partner, someone I thought I could trust completely, had taken a job in another city, leaving me to handle things on my own. It wasn't the first time they'd been away for work, but this time felt different. Maybe it was the way the silence of the apartment seemed to weigh heavier, or how the absence of my partner left me with more time to think. Too much time. The loneliness crept in, and I found myself becoming increasingly aware of everything around me. Even my neighbor, who had always been a familiar face, seemed to act a little differently lately. We had been friendly for months, a few casual exchanges in the hallway, a smile here, a hello there. Nothing out of the ordinary. They were just another person living in the same building, someone I didn't think much about until recently. But then, over the past few weeks, their behavior had become strange. It was subtle at first, small things that didn't make sense. The way they'd linger just a little too long when we'd cross paths in the hallway, the way their eyes seemed to linger when they spoke to me. I didn't think much of it. It could have been nothing, but a feeling started to form in the pit of my stomach, an unease that I couldn't shake. I told myself I was just overthinking things. After all, my partner was away, and I hadn't had a reason to doubt anything. Still, there was a nagging voice in my head that couldn't be ignored. Maybe it was just my mind playing tricks, making me paranoid. Yet, as the days went by, the neighbor's presence felt more like an intrusion than a coincidence. Something about their mannerism didn't sit right with me. At times, I caught them staring at me, their gaze lingering just a bit too long. I tried to push the thoughts away, telling myself I was imagining things. But that feeling of discomfort never really went away. One evening, I found myself alone in the apartment. As usual, a quiet evening with only my thoughts for company. I had been reading on the couch when I heard a knock on the door. It wasn't unusual to get visitors now and then, though it was strange for someone to knock at this hour. When I opened the door, it was my neighbors standing there. They smiled, but it wasn't the casual smile I was used to. It felt too intense. "Hey, I just wanted to check in on you," they said, their voice slightly too soft for my liking. "I noticed you've been alone a lot lately. Everything okay?" I hesitated for a moment, surprised by the concern. I didn't know how to respond. What did they mean by that? Was I that obvious? "I'm fine, just been reading. Thanks for checking in," I replied, trying to sound as normal as possible. They didn't leave right away, though. Instead, they stood there for a moment, looking at me with that same intense expression, their gaze heavy. There was something unsettling about the way they looked at me, like they knew something I didn't. It made my skin crawl. "Well, if you ever need anything," they continued, "don't hesitate to ask." I nodded, not knowing what else to say, and then they finally left. But that encounter left a strange feeling lingering in the air. It wasn't the first time I'd interacted with them, but it was the first time I felt something was off. I couldn't pinpoint it. There was just an oddness in the air when they spoke, something that felt forced and insincere. As the days went on, I couldn't shake that unease. I found myself thinking about that moment more than I wanted to admit, replaying it in my mind. The way they had looked at me, the way their voice sounded just a little too careful. It all felt off. I tried to convince myself it was nothing, that I was overthinking it, but deep down, I knew something wasn't right. I couldn't ignore it. The next day, something happened that made everything worse. While I was on my way out, I bumped into the neighbor again. This time, they seemed more eager to talk. I didn't know what had changed, but their presence felt overpowering, like they were almost too close. Their eyes were wide, and they smiled at me with a strange intensity. "I'm glad you're okay," they said, their voice dripping with something I couldn't quite name. I was just thinking we should hang out sometime. Just the two of us, nothing serious, just a chat." The way they phrased it sent an unexpected shiver down my spine. It wasn't just an invitation. It felt like something more, something hidden behind their words. I didn't know what to say. I had always thought of them as just a neighbor, someone to be friendly with, nothing more. But the longer I stood there, the more it became clear that I had been wrong. There was something going on that I didn't understand, something I wasn't prepared for. It was then that I began to wonder if my partner knew about any of this. They had never mentioned anything about the neighbor, and I had no reason to think anything was wrong. But the growing unease made me question everything. Was it possible that something was happening behind my back, something that I was too blind to see? The feeling of being trapped, of not knowing who to trust, became overwhelming. And just like that, I found myself on the edge of something I couldn't control, unsure of how to proceed. The truth was, I didn't know what was really happening with my neighbor, but deep down, I felt the familiar weight of something terrible brewing, something I couldn't escape. The next evening, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. My neighbor's behavior was gnawing at me. I tried to distract myself by cleaning, watching TV, even calling a friend, but everything seemed to bring me back to that unsettling conversation. The words they'd said echoed in my mind, and no matter how much I tried to ignore it, the tension in my gut only grew stronger. I hadn't expected the visit, and I certainly hadn't expected the strange request to hang out. But what unsettled me even more was the way they spoke, like they knew something I didn't, something that was hidden in plain sight. I kept telling myself it was just a neighbor trying to be friendly, trying to convince myself there was nothing sinister behind their actions. But the truth was, something felt wrong, and I couldn't ignore it. There was an undercurrent to their behavior that didn't sit right with me. The friendly gestures, the lingering stares, everything felt forced. I wasn't used to feeling this paranoid, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized there had been little signs all along. Maybe I just hadn't paid enough attention before. The following morning, I ran into them again in the hallway. This time, they looked even more eager to speak, as if they'd been waiting for me. Their eyes locked onto mine, and I couldn't shake the sense of discomfort that washed over me. I forced a smile, trying to keep things casual, but their presence felt too heavy. They started asking questions. Simple, innocent questions about my plans, how I was spending my time, whether I needed anything. It seemed harmless, but there was something unsettling in the way they spoke, like they were fishing for information. I tried to change the subject, but they wouldn't let it go. They kept asking about my partner, how long they'd been gone, if I was okay being alone. Every question felt like a subtle probe, as if they were testing the waters, gauging my vulnerability. I couldn't help but wonder if they were trying to find out more about my relationship, more about my life. Maybe it was just my paranoia, but it didn't feel like a casual conversati. The truth hit me like a slap to the face. I stood there, staring at my neighbor, trying to make sense of what they had just said. "You're not the only one with secrets," they repeated, their eyes darting away for a moment as if the weight of their own words had startled them. I felt the blood drain from my face, my mind racing. My breath caught in my throat, and for a brief second, all I could do was stare back in silence, waiting for something to make sense of it all. "Whose secrets?" I managed to ask, my voice barely above a whisper, unsure if I even wanted the answer. The words felt like a trap, and I realized with horror that I was standing right in the middle of it. My heart hammered in my chest, but the neighbor didn't seem to care about the tension. They didn't seem to care about the weight of the situation. The moment stretched between us like a thick rope, heavy and taut. They didn't respond immediately, instead looking down at the floor, almost like they were calculating how much they could reveal without fully spilling everything. It wasn't just their hesitation that unsettled me. It was the way they seemed resigned to the situation, like they had already accepted it. "I thought you knew," they finally said, their voice low, almost regretful. "But I guess you didn't. I didn't want to be the one to tell you." The words hit me like ice water. I didn't want to hear them. I didn't want to understand what they were implying. But somehow, I had a sinking feeling in my gut that told me exactly where this was going. "Tell me what?" I snapped, a spark of anger flaring in my chest. "Just spit it out. I can't do this anymore. Stop playing games." They sighed, their shoulders sagging as if all their energy had been drained. "It's your partner," they said, their words almost too soft to catch. "They've been seeing someone else." The room seemed to tilt under my feet. I couldn't process it, couldn't make sense of what was happening. The floor felt like it was swallowing me whole. I wasn't even sure how to react. My partner? With someone else?
How? Why?
How could I have been so blind to everything? "You're lying," I muttered, almost pleading with them, not wanting to believe it. But I knew they weren't. Something in the way they spoke, the look in their eyes, it was the truth. They've been spending time together for months now. The neighbor continued, their voice tinged with a mix of guilt and indifference. I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't want to hurt you. But I can't watch it go on like this. It felt like the world was slipping through my fingers, as if I was losing control of everything around me. My breath quickened. The anger and confusion swirled together, choking me. All the signs that I had ignored, the things I had brushed off as coincidence, now made sense. The late nights, the extra phone calls, the odd messages, the missed time. It all added up, but I had been too trusting, too naive to see it. You're the one who's been keeping this from me? I spat, the words bitter in my mouth. My chest ached with betrayal, but somehow, the anger felt more real than the pain. I couldn't think straight. My mind was a blur of hurt and disbelief, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to cry or scream. Why would you even tell me now? What do you get out of this? They didn't answer right away, their face unreadable. But after a long pause, they finally spoke again. I didn't want to be the one to do this, they said, sounding almost tired. But someone had to. You deserve to know the truth. The truth. It felt like a slap every time it was mentioned. How had I not known? How had I missed all the signs? The person I had loved, trusted, shared my life with, was out there betraying me. The weight of that realization crashed down on me harder than anything else. It wasn't just a betrayal, it was a complete destruction of everything I thought was real. The foundation of my entire life had just crumbled. In that moment, I didn't know what to do. I couldn't think, couldn't feel, couldn't even process what I had just learned. My thoughts were jumbled, clouded with anger, heartbreak, and disbelief. I had spent so much time thinking I was the one who was secure, the one who had it all together. But in reality, I had been the last one to know. It was as if the life I had been living wasn't real at all. I was just the fool who had been played. Why didn't you just tell me sooner? I asked, my voice shaky, my fists clenched. Why wait until now? Why let me live in this lie for so long? They shifted uncomfortably, clearly not expecting such a direct confrontation. But I didn't care. I needed answers. I didn't want to hurt you more than I had to, they replied, their voice quieter now. But it was only a matter of time before you found out. I didn't want to be the one to shatter your world. But it was too late. My world had already shattered. And the person who had been the source of my trust, my love, was the one who had torn it all apart. The neighbor, as much as I resented them for withholding this, was telling me the truth. The truth I didn't want to hear, but desperately needed. I felt empty, like someone had sucked all the air out of the room. I had no words left, no more energy to fight. I just wanted to escape from this nightmare, to get away from everything that reminded me of the life I had thought I understood. But there was no escape. Not now. Not after everything had been laid bare. I stood there in complete silence, absorbing the harsh truth like a punch to the gut. The room felt smaller, suffocating, as if the walls were closing in around me. My neighbor's words were still ringing in my ears, but I couldn't find the strength to respond. The weight of everything they had just told me was too much to bear. My partner, the person I trusted, the one I thought I knew, had been living a double life behind my back. I couldn't believe it. I didn't want to believe it. But there it was, undeniable and brutal. For a long moment, I simply stared at the floor, not knowing what to do or where to go. My mind was spinning. The anger I felt toward my partner, toward myself, toward this neighbor who had known for who knows how long, it all mixed together, creating a storm of emotions that I could barely contain. I wanted to scream, to lash out, but the words wouldn't come. I was paralyzed by the realization of how completely I had been deceived. The neighbors seemed to sense my shock, their voice softer now. I'm sorry, they said. I never meant for you to find out like this. I didn't want to cause any more pain. It felt hollow. The apology was too little, too late. I didn't want their sympathy. I didn't want anything from them. I just needed to make sense of everything, to find some clarity amidst the chaos. But all I could see was a sea of broken trust. The life I thought I was living had been a lie. I don't want your pity, I managed to say, my voice cold and steady. It was all I could muster. I want the truth. All of it. Everything. The neighbor hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. I could see they were struggling, torn between telling me more or retreating into silence. Finally, they spoke again, their voice filled with reluctance. I didn't mean to hurt you, but they didn't just find someone else. They found someone in this building. The words hit me like a slap. I thought I had been betrayed by the one person I trusted. But this was a betrayal that cut deeper than I could have imagined. My partner hadn't just been unfaithful, they had been hiding it.